You know, there's a burnout culture across every church, across every business, and every place of work. Burnout wasn't even talked about when I was younger in my career. Now it's like the trend. Everyone's burned out. And I think everyone's burned out because their motivations are misaligned and they're actually living out of insecurity. And I think now more than ever, the way that people lead and a lot of leaders in these days, they don't provide security. They often provide fear, which only fuels more insecurity in your people around you. And that insecurity leads to disappointment and disillusionment, and then burnout. Welcome to the Brave Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Owen, and today's topic is something that I've been wrestling with for quite some time, and I'm hoping to share with you that maybe it may challenge and encourage you today as well. You see, insecurity actually can fuel disillusionment. Let me explain what I mean and where I'm coming from. Why is it that sometimes giving, when we give to others, when we work and we serve others, it leaves us burned out, resentful, or empty? You ever been there before? Isn't it supposed to be good to pour into others, to serve, and to work? I really believe that spiritual formation that God does in our lives is for the glory of God and for the sake of others. But here's the truth. When you give from insecurity or fear or seeking approval or something, it doesn't just drain you. It always will set you up for disappointment. And that's what I mean when I say insecurity fuels disillusionment. See, the problem isn't giving. Giving is important. It's part of who we are. Everything that has life gives, it produces, right? But if insecurity is driving your giving and your generosity, your relationships, your work, your service, you'll always feel like it's never enough. But when security, see, that's what I'm after today. And that's something you can seek today. Security in who you are and who you're created to be, and your calling, in your identity. Security in Christ. When that fuels your giving, you can serve others without losing yourself. And I have to be honest, I've been there. You know, I would say yes because I was afraid of letting people down. I would get overextended because I thought I had to prove my worth. And every time I ended up empty. But see, my relationship with Christ, I see it. I see how he keeps reminding me that my worth isn't earned by what I give. It's rooted in how I live and how I serve him and others. You see, insecurity will always overpromise and will always underdeliver. Because when you live out of that, it's like telling you that giving more and giving more and giving more, that will make you secure. But that will always lead to burnout. And I've talked to a number of people, even some of the recent posts that I've had on Instagram and social and Facebook, people have been replying that a lot of them have experienced burnout. And it wasn't because of the work. It was because they were trying to prove something and they were working out of ambition and out of approval rather than out of security. And I believe that this is something that I'm wrestling with on the Brave Wisdom podcast. And I want to even bring in some more guests to tackle this topic, that security in Christ is the only source that makes your giving sustainable. See, here's a key insight. When insecurity fuels your action, no amount of giving will ever be enough because it demands approval, it demands recognition, it demands affirmation that may never come. And that's the truth. We work in organizations, we work for places, we work and serve, and we're seeking affirmation. Maybe affirmation we're lacking because of the insecurity that we have in our own lives that we haven't dealt with. And that's important. That's something I'll encourage you with. You got to deal with this. You got to ask the question, why do I feel this way? Or why does that person make me feel this way? I'm reminded in the Bible that there's many verses that speak into this very topic. Galatians 1:10, you can look it up and study it further. It actually has this line that jumps off the page. Am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Proverbs 29:25 says, the fear of man will prove to be a snare. You see, have you ever said yes when you didn't have the margin to do something and you still did it just because you didn't want to that person to think less of you? You see, that's insecurity. That's when insecurity takes the wheel, and it always leads to frustration. I know that when I say yes when I really don't want to, it's not a healthy decision because ultimately, when I'm in the midst of that decision, I'm frustrated or I'm wishing I was doing something else. So maybe slow down before you say yes. Maybe ask yourself, am I saying yes because I'm secure in Christ, or am I saying yes because I'm afraid of rejection? And then when you start asking yourself that, the healthy thing to do is to start building boundaries that honor God, not just other people's expectations. And let me explain what that means is that you can honor God by saying no to people. Because sometimes saying no means that they need to figure out another way and not just rely on you. And I think it goes further. I had a conversation with Calvin, and he was challenging me that a lot of times the struggles in relationships isn't because you don't love the other person, it's because you don't love yourself. And I think that's true. And the greatest commandment is to love God and to love yourself and love your neighbor as yourself, which is often forgotten. And I think that's in the high achieving, high performing kind of groups that I'm in, and the type of relationships I have in business, and even my wife and I, we're both very high ambitious leaders, but we tend to overextend ourselves, and some of that comes from an insecure place. So I ask you the question today as you're listening, what's one area where insecurity has been draining you dry? Now let's talk more about how insecurity fuels disillusionment. Because when that recognition doesn't come, that's where the disappointment hardens into disillusionment over time. Jeremiah 17:5-8 says it this way: trusting in people leads to barrenness, but trusting in the Lord leads to fruitfulness. I think we put a lot of trust in our leaders, which we should. We should honor them. We should trust them. We should follow those that are following Christ. But I think we should also trust the Lord first, and do the fruitful work that comes out of that faith and love and honoring of God. You know, whenever I would walk away from seasons of serving, feeling bitterness or unseen, I've come to realize it had a lot to do with the fact that I was trying to be seen, and I was trying to believe that this performance would bring security. But that was the illusion. And that's why insecurity will always fuel disillusionment, because it'll fuel frustration when your expectations aren't met. Disappointment is that gap between expectation and reality. And I think we have super expectation. I think the very people that deal with this, lack of confidence sometimes are the very people that also tend to have high expectation of themselves and of others. And that's the struggle tension I'm talking about when I say insecurity fuels disillusionment. In my arena group with Owen McManus, they talk about people that are passionate and wanting change and are high energy like me. That's always a good thing when it's pointed at the project or pointed at the work and the serving and the giving. But those same people that do that, like myself, they end up pointing it at themselves, and that becomes a very challenging space and a challenging place. And I think I've learned over the last few years that I need to quit pointing that challenge towards myself and start accepting where I'm at and believing that I'm being transformed and formed every day, formed into the image of Christ. Like I say a lot on this podcast, I'm being spiritually formed into that image, that highest aim, which is Christ. I'm wanting to be more like him. Why? Because I want to serve my wife more. I want to serve my children more. And I want to serve others more. And I want to do it out of a place of security in who I am in Christ. There has to be a better way. You know, there's a burnout culture across every church, across every business, and every place of work. Burnout wasn't even talked about when I was younger in my career. Now it's like the trend. Everyone's burned out. And I think everyone's burned out because their motivations are misaligned and they're actually living out of insecurity. And I think now more than ever, the way that people lead, and a lot of leaders in these days, they don't provide security. They often provide fear, which only fuels more insecurity in your people around you. And that insecurity leads to disappointment and disillusionment, and then burnout. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to shift my focus from people's approval to God's delight. I remember Leslie used to say that her Sabbath was delight days. Those were days where she would delight in God and just enjoy her rest. But what would our lives look like if all of our work was delighting in God and delighting in those that God brings into your life and the work and the opportunities that you get to do with the talents that He's given you? What would delight look like when you're delighted with who you are and the situation and everything that you're encountering? What would your work and life look like when maybe you were just a little more thankful? I have studied this intently, that gratitude is the fuel that fuels so much in life and work. When you are thankful, everything changes. So perhaps now, that feeling of insecurity, if you're struggling with it, if you're struggling with your job, or if you're on your way to burnout, maybe the quickest thing you can do to start shifting the momentum is to be thankful and to have gratitude again for where you are and where you're going. I truly believe, and I've seen this and those that have gone before us and the people that we probably all admire, when you're secure in Christ, you're giving last. You're not frantically pouring out. You're not just trying to hold things together. You are steady and you are strong, and you have what I like sharing on here. You have courage and wisdom and strength. Jesus promises in John 15:5, if you remain in me, you will bear much fruit. You see, I think we're all after that. We're all after the fruit. But the question is, are we remaining? Are we secure in Christ? Because here's the truth. Security doesn't mean you'll never get tired, but it does mean that you'll have staying power. You can say no without guilt. You can say yes without burning out because you're anchored in truth instead of chasing approval. So here's the challenge before we wrap up. Before you commit to giving this week, ask yourself, am I giving to prove something, or am I giving in a grounded foundation of who I am already? Is your giving seeking approval, or is it something that's coming out of you because it's who you are? And what would change in your life if giving wasn't about approval or earning? Rather, it was about enduring and serving others in the best way that you possibly can. And how much would your life change if giving wasn't about approval or about earning something? It was simply something that flowed from who you were and who you were becoming every day. So some key takeaways that you can continue to think about and probably study further yourself. Insecurity drains. Insecurity disillusions. But security fuels endurance and lasting work. I want to thank you for listening. This is the Brave Wisdom Podcast, where courage fuels radical focus and wisdom cuts through the lies. We'll talk to you next time. We'll see you next time.